G'day people, I'm Sharyn. Welcome to my channel. The fully reversible quilt is almost finished. In fact, what you're about to watch is information about how I put the borders on. But it's a bit hard to take photos of the entire quilt, and I'm at the point where I'm hand sewing down bindings. So I've done some pieces so I can show you what it's going to end up looking like, and then I can just enjoy the process of stitching it out. We'll begin with a game of make-believe. We're making believe that this is the quilt and these are the pieces that I'm going to put on as borders, and I've already got them backing, wadding, top fabric stitched together. There's two of them, and I want to apply one on each side of this quilt. I do not use tape measures to work out how long these need to be, and the reason is every time I take a measurement, it's probably going to be a little bit different. I might have moved it, I might have done something wrong, and that number's just not accurate. It depends how tight I've pulled the tape measure or how loose I've left it. All sorts of things that when you're working over a long length with a quilt that's 6 feet or 200 centimeters or something long, it's easy to actually measure incorrectly. The particular quilt that I'm doing, the reversible one, is very much bias down the middle in both directions. And I want to make sure that I allow for that. So I know it's likely to stretch this way and this way. How do I get my borders for it? I take my two borders. I could do them over here, or I could do them over here, but maybe my original quilt is actually a bit trapezoid. Maybe it goes in at the top, by a little bit, but it goes in. And if I do that, I'm going to end up with a trapezoid quilt overall. So I actually want the border that I put on this side and the border that I put on this side to be the same size. I took my two border pieces, I lay them on top of the relaxed quilt, and I let them be relaxed, and then I cut them off at the end. Maybe if you're like me doing a quilt that is on the bias, give yourself a ½ inch extra or a centimetre extra, because it will just make your life easier to have that bit extra. How do I work it then? This quilt I can fold in half and find the center, and I could put a marker here with a pin or draw something on it. So there's my center. I also want to know where the quarters are, and to do that I can take this end in here and put another pin in or mark. I do that, the quilt is marked into quarters. Here's some pieces that I've cut out to the right length, and I do the same with them. I mark them in half and I find the quarters. Now I can put them side by side. The trouble is that on a full-sized quilt, this edge here might be 6 feet long, and if I've only got this many markings, I'm trying to match things up through 1.5 feet. That's a lot to do. I found a new way to do this. At this point, putting my quilt together, remember we're pretending this is a completed piece of border. So it's the same thickness, and I'm going to zigzag all the way along here. But this, on a full-size quilt, is 18 inches, and that's a long way. So what I did some zigzag here, and I did zigzag here, joining the two marked points together, and then I did some zigzag here, and some zigzag here, and some zigzag at this end. And by doing that, there was then some big loopy bits in between, but that allowed me to then go to each of these areas and mark across and give myself an extra piece of marking. So just with a pencil on each side of that fabric gave me some extra markers. So when I started zigzagging again, this bit and this bit were already done, but I had a mark in the middle that I could use to help me. So as I came along, I used my pull and push to get those markings together, kept going until where the zigzag was already there, and then so on along my quilt. It's much easier than trying to do things when you've got huge big stretches that you're trying to get together. At the machine, ready to add my cream border to the cream side of the quilt. I've got all the markings done. I've got a zigzag set to 5 wide and 2 long, and I'm just zigzagging these together. And it is purely a matter of having my zigzag go from one side on the quilt to the other side on the border. Now I've got to the point where those first 2 marks are on the quilt, or I need to adjust these so that when I get to those 2 marks, they match up. And that is how I add my borders onto the quilt. After I had zigzagged this along here, under normal circumstances, I would have put the tape on the back and the front. But on this one, I wanted to do things a little bit differently. So with it just zigzagged together, I worked out the pieces to go up the sides, and I put them on exactly the same way I did the first ones. But of course, this was going across the border, the center, and the other border. So when I did my folding, the pieces were actually a little bit bigger because those borders made them bigger. And I got these end pieces on. At this point, when I put the tape on in this direction, I took it all the way across to the edge, and in this direction, I took it all the way across to the edge. And that on the blue side of the quilt gives me a little blue square in these corners. On the white side of the quilt, or the cream side of the quilt, it's all just cream. Here's the cream side of the quilt. And because the border fabric is cream, the tape, which is joining the border fabric to the quilt, is cream, and the binding is cream, just gives me an edge that is all cream. Yes, you can see when you get close to it that there's some separate bits, but if you're at a distance, you're not going to see those things. It's just going to look cream. And here's the blue side of the quilt. Quilt, tape that's joining the border on, border, and binding. Because these have got contrast, it's quite a different look to the cream only. And I really love that. It's striking. If I had had more of this splatter fabric, it possibly would have been a good idea to go wider with the border and make it more of a feature. I was really running out of fabric though, so that's as much as I really could do. Lots of fun things to play with though. Different colours on your tape, different widths of tape would change this a lot. Different widths here would change it a lot. You can see there where I put the tape in both directions all the way to the edge. It gave me that little blue square in the corner. There are really so many things you could play with here. If this was wider, that square would be considerably bigger. It's all just a matter of thinking of what interesting things you could do with it to make enormously different and fascinating combinations out of this method of Quilt As You Go that is completely reversible and really not all that hard to do. I really hope you've enjoyed this fully reversible quilt and the series of videos that I've made about it. I've really had fun with it, and it has sparked an immense number of ideas about other things that I can do with Quilt As You Go. So, hope you've enjoyed it. Check out the playlist if you haven't seen all of the things about it, and I'll see you next time.